Ladies and gentlemen, those two brief clips speak to the very foundation and philosophy of Google Kenya, the African Center for Advanced Technology, and the Kenya Film Classification Board. To begin this series, a series of lectures by PLO Lumumba, who is a renowned scholar of law, a professor of law, and a Pan-Africanist, who has distinguished himself as a great believer in the continent of Africa, a man who has laid the foundation by showing that Africa has brains and Africa has resources, and that the greatest asset that this continent has is not just the minerals, it's not just the material wealth, but also the brains of its people, the great innovation and the creativity of our youth, and the courage of our people, especially the African heroes that we are going to talk about today, and about whom the President and the Right Honorable Prime Minister have so eloquently elucidated. The Professor PLO Lumumba, true to his name, is a man of courage and great fortitude, and he espouses wisdom that is deeply rooted in research and understanding. And while from his own words, he may not possess the monopoly of wisdom, he brings to us an exciting and insightful moment tonight, where he's going to give us a lecture, the first of this series, on our heroes, the Mashujaa reflections. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to now welcome Professor PLO Lumumba to give the inaugural lecture on Mashujaa reflections. PLO, welcome.
Thank you very much. Let me start by acknowledging those who have put this great initiative together. The young Martha must be recognized for the great work that our organization has undertaken. We must also recognize Google and the other organizations that have taken time to put together what will go down in history as a celebration of men and women who deserve to be celebrated. Indeed, the significance of this initiative has been prefaced by the comments already made by the Honorable former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, Raila A, Odinga, and the remarks of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Uhuru M Kenyatta, and the words of my very good friend, Dr. Ezekiel Mutua. Any nation that does not recognize our men and women of courage and character is a nation that is headed to the abyss. In order to understand the history of humanity, it cannot be denied that the continent of Africa is the cradle of human civilization. Historians, anthropologists, and others who care to investigate are now convinced beyond peradventure that life started on this continent. But yet there is another sad truth, that this continent has been abused by other civilizations. This is the single continent whose men and women were taken out of our belly to build other parts of the world through slavery. Historians record that nearly half of the population of the continent of Africa was taken to the Caribbean, to the Americas, and to Europe. And Africans were dehumanized and commodified. And when the project of slavery lost its luster, the European powers sat in Berlin, in Germany, in the year 1884 and 1885 and parceled the continent into their spheres of influence, so that Africa became the only continent in the world that was referred to as Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone, and sometimes even Arabophone. But it cannot be denied that even before those very activities, the continent of Africa was the home of great thinking. Indeed, historians now say without fear of contradiction that the Greek philosophers gathered their knowledge from the continent of Africa, that astrology had its home in Africa, that warriors were schooled in Africa. And that is why it is necessary to go back into history and ask ourselves which of the African heroes have not been recognized because we were forced during the colonial period to redefine who heroes and heroines were. This conversation that we are now undertaking is a conversation of rediscovery and self-realization. We have recognized that if a society does not recognize those who have served her in different ways, then that society cannot realize our true potential. Kenya, which is our focus in this journey, is a country that was created and developed under the tutelage of Africans, but was rudely interrupted by the colonial project. And the colonial project is one whose agenda was to use the human resource and natural resources for purposes of benefiting the colonizer. They came, they saw, they thought they conquered, but they did not. Because each of the societies in our country were underpinned by certain ideals. And these ideals resided in the hearts and minds of men. Kenya found itself as a geographical space which confined certain communities within her belly. So that today when we talk about Kenya, it is a country that is heterogeneous. It is a country that enjoys diversity. But is it not that diversity that makes her great? Is it not that diversity that makes her rich? Is it not that diversity that makes her strong? Is it not that diversity that gives her light? Is it not that diversity that makes her great? That is why on an occasion such as this, when we begin to talk about Kenyan heroes, we must remember our nations, because it is our nations which are rich in their culture. It is our nations which are rich in their traditions. It is our nations which are rich in their wisdom. It is our nations which are rich in the manner in which they interact with other civilizations. The Kenya that we talk about is a mixed potpourri of many nations. Who among you will forget that Kenya has the Taveta and their heroes? Who among you here will forget that Kenya has the Abagusi and their heroes and heroines? Who among you here will forget that we have the Agikoyo, the Nandi, the Kipsigis, the Teso, the Abasuba, the Luo, the Meru, the Embu, the Dashnach, the Yaku, the Sengwer, and many others? All these communities are communities which, having been put within the territorial boundary of Kenya, have determined that what some may describe as the Tower of Babel is nothing but indeed a power of Babel. That what others see as hurdles are indeed bridges that can be used for the benefit of the communities. That what others see as disadvantages are indeed advantages that they can utilize. And there is no shortage of heroes and heroines who will forget that we had noble seers, who will forget that we had seers such as Lenana of the Maasai, who will forget that we had Mwanakupona, who will forget that we had Siokimau, who will forget that we had Kiboe of the Abasuba, who will forget that we had Luanda Magere and Gor Mahia of the Luo, who will forget the noble Lenana, who will forget Koitalel Ole Samoei, who will forget Mora Ngiti of the Kukisi or the Abagusi, who will forget the heroes that we depended on in order to liberate ourselves from the shackles and the manacles of colonial powers, who will forget them in the different ways in which they visited us. They were warriors, they were magicians, they were seers, they were people who had demonstrated by what and did that they could change their communities in a wonderful and at once an effective way. We are here, therefore, to remind ourselves that the heroes who are identified for us by other civilizations are not our heroes. The heroes whom we celebrate are the ones who have kept our languages alive. They are the ones who have kept our cultures and traditions alive. They are the ones who have kept us alive. They are the ones who have kept our spirituality alive. They are the ones who have underlined the significance of our self-esteem. They are the ones who have demonstrated through history that even when attempts have been made to consign them to the museums of history and to be fossilized, their spirit remains alive and well. History demonstrates not once, not twice, but times without number, that if a society is to realize our potential, that society must recognize the men and women who have formed the foundation stone upon which it is built. Kenya boasts of no less than 47 nations, which the colonizer derisively referred to as tribes. These were nations which had character. They were nations which had opportunities defined by clarity of mind. These were nations which were underpinned by certain values. These were nations which had their own agenda for their people, for their men and women. That is why it has become necessary to bring them to life. If one had thought that they had been fossilized, that they could not be remembered, this initiative now tells us that the time has come. And what we have done is to ensure that we identify 61 of them. There are 61 men and women, because while the world now grapples with the place of women in society, the Kenyan communities gave women and men their pride of place. So that when we talk about our heroes, we also talk about our heroines. When we talk about our warriors, we talk about our women warriors and our men warriors. When we talk about sages and we talk about those who had wisdom, we are not talking about men only, we are talking about women. When we talk about healers, we are not talking about men only, we are also talking about women. When we talk about those who are seers, we are not talking about men only, we are also talking about women, because we recognize that a society which does not give pride of place to both gender is a society adrift, a giant headed to the rocks. We long recognized that just like the piano has two keys, one black, one white, so society has two genders, one woman, one man, and that it is through interaction that we create a society that is balanced and creates harmony. And that is why the enterprise in which we are engaged in is not an enterprise in philosophizing. It is not an enterprise in intellectualizing. It is not an enterprise in moralization. It is not an enterprise in romanticization. It is an enterprise in dealing with the realities as they existed. It is an enterprise in resuscitating what was in comatose. It is an enterprise that is designed to demonstrate to this generation and generations yet to be born that the continent of Africa, as exemplified by Kenya, which is Africa in microcosm, had men and women who served diligently and who must never be forgotten. This is a happy occasion. It is an occasion that gives us the opportunity to examine great minds in the past. Because wisdom tells us that if you want to understand your present, you've got to go to the past. It is in the past that the seed of the present is resident. And it is in the womb of the present that the seed of the future is planted. So when we begin to talk about each one of the heroes, and the time will come when we will talk about each one of them, when we will be talking about Lenana of the Maasai, and we will be mentioning him as a hero, we will be doing so to demonstrate to ourselves and to the world that if the Greeks had their Socrates, we had our own Lenana. We will be demonstrating to the world that if the Macedonians had their Alexander the Great, we had our own Koitalel Ole Samuel. If the French will tell us that they had their Joan of Arc, we will tell them that we had our own Mekatilili Wamenza. And when they are going to bring their women, we are going to tell them that we had no shortage of them. We will tell them that we had Mwana wa Kupona. We will tell them that we had Mora. And if they tell us that they had legendary people like Samson in the Bible, we will tell them that we had Luanda Magere. We will tell them that we had Gor Mahia. We will tell them that among the Meru, they were great heroes. We will tell them that among the Taraka, they were great heroes. We will tell them that amongst the Mbere, they were heroes. We are going to demonstrate to them that we had no shortage of heroes and that these heroes must be immortalized. And we will tell them that our heroes are not only immortalized in our minds and hearts, but that we are resuscitating what they stood for. That is what we are going to do. We are doing it because it must be done. We are doing it because we know that if Africa is to be great, her men and women must be given the oxygen of publicity. We are going to do it because we know that if Kenya is to be great, her great heroes and heroines must be given the oxygen of publicity. We are going to do it because we know that if our young men and women are going to have self-esteem, they must believe that we had heroes. We are going to do it because we must tell our boys that those heroes that we are identifying and that we are immortalizing were once boys, and that the seed of manhood is planted in boyhood. We are going to do it because we are going to tell our young daughters that the seed of womanhood is planted in childhood or in girlhood, and that they are going to be heroes in a new and a great way because they had matriarchs and patriarchs who formed the foundation stone upon which we can now stand proud in the world and say, behold, you have heroes, and behold, we have our own. We are going to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Professor Lumumba. I know that you wanted to also make some brief comments in Swahili, because part of this lecture will also be done in Swahili.
Kweli kabisa, ndugu Mark Matunga. Waswahili husema mwachamila ni mtumwa. Sisi kama Waafrika tumekuwa na historia ndefu. Wengi watakumbuka ya kwamba bara hili la Afrika ni bara ambayo inajulikana kama kitovu cha binadamu. Wadadisi wengi na watafiti wengi tayari wamegundua na kung'amua pamoja ya kwamba binadamu aliibuka katika bara hili. Waandishi wasifika kama yule Msenegali Cheikh Diop akiandika katika kitabu chake ametueleza kinagaubaga ya kwamba wakati wa Yunani walikuwa wanaishi katika mapango katika bara la Afrika, tayari tulikuwa tumestaarabika, lakini janga likatuangukia. Wakaja wazungu, wakaja Waarabu, wakatufanya watumwa, wakatupeleka utumwani. Takwimu zinaonyesha kwamba karibu nusu ya Waafrika walitolewa katika bara la Afrika na kutoroshwa katika nchi za Ulaya na nchi za Amerika. Na katika mchakato mzima wa utumwa, mila na desturi zetu zilipigwa vita, majina tukayabadilisha na vitu vingine ambavyo vilitufanya tuwe wa Afrika. Wakishamaliza janga hilo la utumwa, wakaja na ukoloni. Wazungu wakaketi kule katika nchi ya Ujerumani katika jiji la Berlin, wakaigawa bara la Afrika kwa nchi zisizopungua 50. Waafrika wakawa ni watu ambao wanadharauliwa, ni watu ambao wanabezwa, ni watu ambao walikuwa wamedunishwa. Lakini jambo la kufurahia ni ya kwamba Waafrika walikuwa na mila na desturi zao. Waafrika walikuwa na mashujaa, na mashujaa hao walitapakaa katika kila pembe ya Afrika. Iwe ni Afrika Kusini kulikuwa na mashujaa, iwe ni Afrika ya Magharibi walikuwa na mashujaa, iwe ni Afrika ya Kaskazini ilikuwa na mashujaa, iwe ni Afrika ya Kati ilikuwa na mashujaa. Lakini kwa hivi sasa sisi kama Wakenya tumeamua kuangazia mashujaa wa nchi ya Kenya kutoka katika makabila mbalimbali. Katika mdahalo ambao tutakuwa nao, katika mihadhara ambayo tutayafanya, tutachukua fursa ya kipekee kuwataja mashujaa hao na mchango ambao walifanya katika enzi zao, na watapatikana katika makabila tofauti tofauti ya Kenya. Katika jamii ya Wakikuyu kulikuwa na mashujaa wengi tu. Mugo wa Kibiro walikuwa ni shujaa. Katika jamii ya Wakamba tutapata mashujaa ambao walikuwa ni akina mama na akina baba, sio Kimao. Tutakuwa na mashujaa katika jamii ya Wateso, jamii ya Wanga kama Nabongo Mumia, jamii ya Kipsigis, jamii ya Wanandi, ili mradi katika nchi ya Afrika katika makabila isiyopungua 44 tutakuwa na tuna mashujaa wengi, na vile vile tumewachagua baada ya kuwadadisi na kuwapiga msasa mashujaa 61 ambao tutawaangazia kwa kina ili kuwadhihirishia Wakenya na ulimwengu kwa jumla ya kwamba Afrika ilikuwa na watu ambao walivalia njuga matatizo ambayo ilikumba bara la Afrika. Kutakuwa na wakosoaji wengi, lakini kuna historia ambayo ni dhahiri ya kwamba katika matatizo ambayo iliyakumba nchi nyingi za Afrika, mashujaa hawa walijitolea kama wahanga na wakachangia pakubwa kuhakikisha kwamba hadhi ya Mwafrika ilipewa kipaumbele. Na kilichoko ni ya kwamba lazima kama Wakenya tutambue ya kwamba mila na desturi zetu ni johari ambayo lazima ipewe kipaumbele. Lazima tuangazie vitu hivi na tuhakikishe ya kwamba tumevihifadhi ili tuheshimike, kwa kuwa ni jambo bayana ya kwamba usipojiheshimu mwenyewe basi hutaheshimiwa. Waswahili husema usilolijua ni kama usiku wa giza. Lengo letu ni kuhakikisha kwamba wale ambao hawana historia hii wamepewa fursa ya kuelewa historia ili vizazi vya sasa na vizazi vijavyo viwe katika hali ya kuelewa na kukubali ya kwamba bara hili la Afrika ilikuwa na kina mama na kina baba ambao walikuwa ni mashujaa, ambao walikuwa hodari, watu ambao walikuwa wamepevuka, watu ambao walikuwa majasiri, watu ambao walikuwa majagina, watu ambao walikuwa na uelewa, watu ambao walikuwa na uzalendo, watu ambao walikuwa wamejitolea kuhakikisha kwamba jamii zao ni jamii ambazo zinaheshimika kati ya jamii. Nina hakika ya kwamba mchakato mzima itadhihirisha ya kwamba Kenya ina akina mama, akina baba ambao ni mashujaa na ambao wanastahili heshima. Asanteni sana.